Welcome to a special edition of the OBX Waiver Report, where we discuss what the climate scientists are discussing in order to help them amplify their messages and to counter the harmful messaging by disinformers on the issue of climate change and sometimes other issues as well. And we're going to start out here with Zach Labe right now, who is talking, as he usually does, about sea ice. And this particular series of graphs shows you or provides for you a good snapshot of the conditions in the Arctic right now, where the Arctic is experiencing the 12th warmest January on record. These are recent updates due to new data coming in. The third lowest Arctic sea ice extent on record, so near record low Arctic sea ice, and the 12th warmest January on record, and the seventh lowest Arctic sea ice volume on record. Extent is the area of surface covered by the ice. Volume is the total, I guess, space that the ice occupies in 3 dimensions as it floats on the surface of the ocean. And Arctic sea ice is one of the primary climate indicators, and we should definitely pay attention to that and also pay attention to what Zach Labe is telling us. The other post from yesterday that I wanted to highlight for Zach Labe is this ongoing tracking of record low Antarctic sea ice, which has been continuous throughout 2023. So all of 2023, every single day, we have had a daily record low for Antarctic sea ice. And since early February, it looks like early February, we have had all-time record lows for Antarctic sea ice with a recent slow dip as we get into the end of the Antarctic melt season during Antarctic summer. But this feature here is the main driver for global sea ice record lows that we have recently experienced, also with the Arctic in the extent measure being the third lowest on record. So if you combine the Arctic at third lowest on record and the Antarctic at lowest on record, global sea ice is at or near record lows on a day-to-day basis as well. And sea ice is a major indicator of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning, which is heating the poles more rapidly than the rest of our world. So thank you, Zach Labe, for continuing to provide us with good information on the issue of sea ice melt and showing us the ongoing trends there. I do want to move on to Dr. Michael Mann. And Michael Mann is one of our best informers on the issue of climate change. He's also very effective at countering disinformation. His numerous publications and communications provide us with a stalwart defense against the disinformation coming from climate change deniers. And I want to highlight this particular issue that Dr. Mann is pointing out today, the issue of doom and doomism. We're going to get into a little bit more about doom from Katharine Hayhoe, but I want to talk a little bit about my experience with climate doom. And as a threat analyst and someone who looks at threats with regards to potential impacts from climate change, you can look at all like lots of various scenarios for everything from best to worst case scenarios for burning fossil fuels, best to worst case scenarios for the response from the global climate system in the form of feedbacks and tipping points and things like that. And what I found that as I looked at threats and started to talk about, some of the 10% scenarios, which are like the near worst case scenarios, that those topics got amplified and spun by a group of people that seem to be very interested in the fact that or in the notion, it's not a fact at all, in the notion that we were all doomed, but not at all interested in the notion of actually responding to the threat. And and I want to focus in on this very specifically. It is important, I believe, to understand what the 10% scenarios are and the potential worst case scenarios when it comes to climate change from a perspective of developing a sense of urgency. And if you look at the worst range of cases for climate change, um, and you deal with it rationally, you say, okay, these are potential bad outcomes that may crop up and surprise us and cause us a great deal of damage. We want to avoid that. We want to avoid opening the door to the monsters in the climate crisis closet that may jump out at us and really wreck our day. That's the healthy way of dealing with risk. Now, the unhealthy way of dealing with risk is fear-induced paralysis. And what the climate doomers are selling is fear-induced paralysis, a sense that, oh, everything is inevitable. We have no responsibility. Um, we have no morality. We're just helpless on this giant roller coaster that's going to take us down into hell, into this like hellish death spiral, mass extinction we can't do anything about. And that is bad. That is an unhealthy way of thinking, that is non-factual, and that is disempowering. And the main thing that we want to do here, and the scientists are helping to do, is to empower you with knowledge so that you can act in a positive fashion. And sometimes the knowledge that is provided, particularly in the worst case scenarios or the more damaging scenarios, is scary and hard. But seeing that potential risk way out there gives us the opportunity to avoid it. So that perception of that risk and that potential is the thing that enables you to steer away from it. It's like, if you're on the Titanic, you know that there are icebergs out there. It's just like the climate scientists are saying, okay, there are icebergs. We can slow down the ship. We can change the direction of the ship to avoid the icebergs, and we can reduce the speed of the ship so that, if we do hit the iceberg, it's not catastrophic that in the case that it's going to sink the ship. But the scientists say, if you keep moving at full speed toward the icebergs and you hit an iceberg, the ship's going to sink. It doesn't mean that the appropriate response, in fact, the inappropriate response is, oh, we have to drive the ship at full speed, we're all doomed. And that's basically what the climate doomers are saying. It's all inevitable. We have to drive the ship at full speed toward the icebergs, and then we're doomed. Dr. Mann has been very on point with countering the doomist narratives. They are a form of climate change denial. The narratives almost always include a deflection away from the solutions of climate crisis to include the rapid deployment of clean energy, which is the center of gravity, and basically sells a sense of paralysis, a harmful paralysis. And here in the Times.uk, this article that Dr. Mann is referencing, Dr. Mann talks about countering the doomist narratives, and the Times points out that there are a number of influencers in places like TikTok that are telling us that the planet is doomed regardless of what we do, and that's a dangerous myth, a dangerous thread of misinformation that we should recognize is dangerous, along with climate change denial, which is also a dangerous form of misinformation and a dangerous myth. So let's move on. I do want to talk a little bit about what Katharine Hayhoe is saying because it ties directly into what Dr. Mann is saying here. And I'm just going to highlight this quote from Katharine Hayhoe, Professor Katharine Hayhoe, another climate scientist, another expert communicator on the issue of climate change. And she notes that the 5 stages of climate change denial are deny, basically pretend that climate change is not happening, deflect. Deflection is basically a form of distraction. It's basically like changing the subject. Um, it'd be like saying, okay, well, someone, so like denial's like, oh, it's not happening. Climate change is not happening. Deflection's like, oh, look over there. There's something else is going on. Look at the ozone hole or something like that. The ozone hole is an impact on the Earth's protective ozone layer, but it's not climate change. Climate change is the burning of fossil fuels and the trapping of heat in the atmosphere. Downplay. Downplay is, oh, it's not so bad. It's going to be all right. It's no big deal. We don't have to do anything. And it's the underlying message in all these stages of denial is don't do anything, which is the harm basically. The harm is the paralysis and the lack or the erosion of the will to act on climate. Number 4, the 4th stage of climate change denial is delay. It's like, oh, well, we don't have to act now. We can act later, which is harmful. It's basically, continuously kicking the ball down the road for mass deploying clean energy by making up all these excuses, which are harmful. So it's also delay has been called predatory delay. And then the last stage of climate change denial is despair. It's once the climate change denier realizes, oh, actually climate change is harmful, is damaging, it's something that if you let run out of control will wreck your day. The last bastion of trying not to act for the climate change denial is to curl up in the ball and despair, basically get into this state of paralysis because of climate doom, which Dr. Michael Mann was talking about. Oh, it's terrible. We're all doomed. It's inevitable that we're going to hit the iceberg, for the Titanic metaphor. In this case, for climate change, the doomers are saying, oh, it's inevitable that, humans are going to fail and, their civilization will collapse due to climate change. And, there's nothing we can do about it. And the underlying message of all of these stages of denial is there's nothing we can do about it. And that is the key lie. That is the center of gravity of climate change denial in all its stages. It is selling paralysis. It is selling inaction. It is an attack on hope. And it is an attack on freedom, your freedom to live in an Earth system that is not damaging and dangerous to you, your family, your lives, your health, your well-being, your economic prosperity. And so that's it. Those are the 5 stages of denial. I kind of went through them. I encourage you to talk to Katharine Hayhoe. She's the expert. The good news, she says, is that we can break the cycle and take responsibility for our future. And that's the key. If we take responsibility and we act together, we can forge a better future for everybody. And responsibility doesn't mean that you as a person individually have to take all the responsibility or shame yourself because you still have a carbon footprint, for example. Taking responsibility means that you just take part in the process of improvement and beginning to switch away from the harm. And you can do this in so many ways. You can add, clean energy to your lifestyle. You can vote for candidates that focus on climate action that make it easier for you to act as an individual and that help to systemically change the nature of our energy system, for example, and do all the other sustainability things as well. And the nice thing about it is that Katharine Hayhoe here has provided this Earth Hero Guide to Climate Action as an app that you can download. So I'm going to download this and look at how I can improve my climate action and not fall into the non-action cycle of climate change denial, which is basically like a death spiral. So yeah, let's not do that. Let's do the good things and let's download the Earth Hero app and look and see what we can do on the issue of climate change. All right, so let's move on to Peter Gleek. And Peter Gleek has a number of posts here that are pretty much on point that I want to highlight. I've been covering the extreme weather for the US Southeast. There's a couple of points that Peter Gleek highlights here that I didn't know about. Um, I'm going to get into this a little bit. This is fascinating. This is interesting. Um, and as I'm talking now, I realize there's another point that Katharine Hayhoe brought up. So we're going to go back to Katharine Hayhoe at the end because I want to focus on one little thing here that Katharine Hayhoe brought up. But for right now, we're going to talk about extreme weather that Peter Gleek is focusing on. He says, is it my imagination or is the weather everywhere right now totally messed up? And then he adds hashtag climate crisis, hashtag climate change. And yeah, we've got some really extreme weather going on. I've been reporting a lot on the weather here in the Southeast. We got some extreme heat going on, but there's other stuff going on. We got blizzard up north, and we've got a lot of severe weather out west. And that's one of the things that Peter Gleek is highlighting. And and so let's get down to it. So 16 hours ago, Peter Gleek said, I'm sorry, but this is totally not normal, even in our climate change world where nothing is normal anymore. And he is talking about a winter storm that is expected to strike some of the mountains in California, particularly mountains just north of the Southern California region. Colin McCarthy, a U.S. Storm Watch folk that I am going to follow now, stated that one of the worst winter storms of the 21st century is about to hit the Southern California mountains. Up to 7+ feet of snow could fall above 4,000 feet, with Mount Baldy forecast to be the snowiest ski resort on Earth over the next 7 days, with 100+ inches of snow expected. So I don't know what, possibly 8 feet of snow at Mount Baldy over the next 5 days. And let's go ahead and look at this graphic. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on the post and see if we can get a close up of this graphic. And what we've got right now is a lot of storms running down the coastline toward California off the front side of a massive high pressure system, which is dredging cold air out of the Arctic and hurling it into warmer, moisture air masses that are setting off these mass snowfall accumulations. And what I will do is just let you know that in a warmer Earth system, we've got more moisture loading in the Earth atmosphere. The warmer the system, the more evaporation we have. And so there's more water vapor in the air. And generally speaking, in the present climate state, that provides for both more intense drought conditions, the possibility of more frequent what they call flash droughts. And on the flip side, as that moisture gets evaporated from the land and the ocean into the air, what goes up eventually must come down, particularly in the present climate state. And so what we also see is more intense precipitation events. And this is what Peter Gleek is talking about right now. I'm sorry, but this is totally not normal, even in our climate change world where nothing is normal anymore. So yeah, severe snowfall highlighted by Peter Gleek as a climate crisis fingerprint. So I'm just showing you what the climate scientists are saying. All right, so let's move on to Terry Hughes, who is one of the world's experts on coral, and let's talk about some of the things that Terry Hughes is highlighting. So right now, Terry Hughes is highlighting the protection and planting of trees, and trees are absolutely a sustainability feature. But I will note that we can't protect the trees if we keep burning fossil fuels, because the fossil fuels are going to make the climate hotter regardless of how many trees we have. But if we transition away from fossil fuels and plant more trees, now that's a sustainability value that can help our future. And here we go. So Terry Hughes promoting the planting of trees and the cessation of fossil fuel burning yet again. And I just want to read this statement from Terry Hughes. You can't conserve our oceans for our kids and grandkids while still granting permits for massive new coal mines and gas fields throughout Australia. And this is the case around the world. You just can't. So we've got solutions in the form of clean energy. We can mass deploy them. And this notion of delay, which is a form of climate change denial, so we can burn more gas and coal, is just simply harmful to our future. All right, so let's get back to clean energy. Katharine Hayhoe brings up a point here by posting an article that I wanted to talk about. I encourage you to read the article that we're going to highlight. Let's see, here we go. I think it was by Katharine Hayhoe. Did I? I'm sorry, I think I focused in on one tweet. So let's go ahead and get to another tweet here. Actually, before we get into electric vehicles, because I wanted to talk about electric vehicles, I did want to talk about the rate of deployment for clean energy coming from China. And this is a hopeful feature of China. I am not a supporter of Chinese dictatorship, but what I am a supporter of is Chinese mass deployment of clean energy. And in fact, I think China should be doubling down on its mass deployment of clean energy, and I think that the West should be engaged in a friendly competition with China to mass deploy clean energy as well, and to see who can get to market with wind, solar, electric vehicles, batteries faster. And I think that this competition is not only healthy, but whoever wins the clean energy race will win the race for the future in the world and have a fantastic manufacturing base that provides amazing jobs for its citizens. Now, this is not to say that I support China's other policies, so I just want to be crystal clear here. In fact, I find China threatening Taiwan and helping Russia in its harmful invasion, its genocidal invasion of Ukraine, to be reprehensible. But I see this as an aspect of its authoritarian nature. The clean energy side I see as a democratizing, moderating influence, not just for China, but for pretty much everywhere in the world. And so let's support both clean energy and democracy, and let's do our best to outcompete China, because we want democracies to have the clean energy win as well here. Not to say that what China is doing when it comes to clean energy is not helpful, but China does a lot of other unhelpful stuff. So we want the people who are actually taking responsibility for democracy to have the leadership position. We want the governments of we, the people, not the authoritarians, to have the leadership. All right, so let's get further down the thread here. And I want to highlight this tweet by Elena Shao talking about big, beefy electric pickups, which are here. And they look a lot like the gas trucks, and they are much greener. And the question that Elena is asking, is it too good to be true? She says the answer is complex. I'm going to go through some of the facts regarding electric trucks versus regular cars. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the scientists, in this case, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and do a comparison of an electric truck versus a regular truck versus a regular car here in North Carolina, which is not the greenest state in the union when it comes to electricity. And then we're going to take the electric truck to a greener state and see how that looks. But I will say that the pundits generally feed into climate denial and delay by often over focusing on the negative aspects or creating negative aspects of electric vehicles that do not exist. And it is important to note that electric vehicles are overall much more efficient and much more environmentally friendly than their regular vehicle counterparts. And in addition to that, as the energy systems that fuel the electric vehicles become more based in wind, water, and solar power, then the environmental impacts of the electric vehicle shrinks over time and you can have zero emissions in use. And then in addition, as the manufacturing chains become more based on clean energy and clean manufacturing processes, the carbon cost of producing the materials for the vehicles also falls. So you can get to a net zero or even net negative emission from an electric vehicle, even an electric truck, if you have a sustainability based process that transforms both manufacturing and energy systems. And that's the truth that the pundits should be talking about. And maybe I used too many words to say that. Maybe I didn't say that in the perfect, correct, news speak. I'll let you pundits decide on how to best communicate that fact. But that's a fact that I believe the pundits have left out thus far and probably should be talking about now. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is an electric truck. And I went ahead and plugged in my zip code to see what the mile per gallon equivalent would be for a Ford F-150 here in North Carolina. And what I found was that the Ford F-150 Lightning has a 62 mile per gallon equivalent versus a 22 mile per gallon equivalent for the average truck or SUV. This is nearly 3 times less of an impact than a typical truck. And this plugged into the grid here in North Carolina, which is not the cleanest grid available. So let's go ahead and do this again and change the zip code to we're going to look at Maryland, which is not the it doesn't have 100% clean energy, but it's got a higher level. So we're going to look at the Ford F-150 Lightning again, and we're going to look at 2022 and uh, hold on, Ford F-150 Lightning 2022. Oh, do I? Yeah, apparently I have to refresh this page so I can plug in a different zip code. All right, so let's go plug in a zip code. And as we do, I want to show you this. So the average gasoline car gets 25 miles per gallon. That's only 3 miles per gallon more than the average truck. So if you're getting a Ford F-150 Lightning, you're getting more than 2 times the equivalent fuel efficiency, and you're cutting your carbon emissions by more than half here in North Carolina. But if you just choose the average electric vehicle, you can get a much better gain when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. So there is a bit of back and forth. But one of the things I did notice is that the average hybrid vehicle is still more harmful to the environment than the average electric truck. So if you're trying to choose between like a hybrid that's, mid-size and a truck, your truck is still going to have less of an environmental impact. Okay, so let's look at Maryland for the Ford F-150 Lightning. and see what the mile per gallon equivalent is. And then I have to put in my... All right, here we go. So, oh, hey, interesting. So in Maryland, okay, I was under the impression that the North Carolina grid was not as clean as the Maryland grid, but apparently I am wrong. So yeah, so the mile per gallon equivalent for the F-150 Lightning is approximately 59 miles per gallon, which is almost 3 times as efficient as your average truck or SUV. And so now I'm curious. Let's see, do we have a map here? Um, I don't have a map. It used to be that there was a map for fuel efficiency, apparent fuel efficiency of electric vehicles. And now that we're getting electric trucks, of course, this adds a new wrinkle to the process. But what I will say is that, generally speaking, electric trucks are less efficient than mid-range electric vehicles, but they are more efficient than everything else. And so if you're going to have a truck and you want to be a part of climate action, you having an electric truck will be a major positive for the climate system versus a gasoline truck. And eventually, even your truck can have net zero emissions both in production and in use as the energy systems change and as the manufacturing systems change. And that is a major climate win, and that is very hopeful. And don't let anyone tell you that your electric truck is not clean when compared to a gasoline vehicle, because that is just not the facts. And if your choice is between an electric truck or an SUV and a gasoline vehicle, you can definitely have a positive impact on the energy system and the climate crisis by going electric. And if we mass deploy these electric vehicles, including electric trucks, our climate system and future looks a lot better. And of course, there are ways that you can get more and more efficient. And so if you're looking at the perfect, if you want the perfect solution, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this case, but if you want the perfect solution, the e-bike is really the amazing high efficiency solution, or the pedal-based bike is even more amazing high efficiency, but the e-bike has better range. It's like a moped, that kind of thing, and it's going to give you more mobility. So based on your needs, you can pick hopeful solutions, and you don't need to be shamed for not picking the perfect solution. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's all move forward together and do the best we can. And part of doing the best we can is mass deploying electric vehicles, and that includes electric trucks. All right, so thank you for joining me for this special edition of the OBX Wave Report, where we dive into what the climate scientists are talking about, and we do some analysis, some breakdowns, some discussion based on what they are saying. I hope that I have represented all of you climate scientists well. Thank you for continuing to provide the communication to the public, which is a major public service, and um, please keep doing what you are doing. And I will continue to help amplify your messages, and I hope that others do the same. So thank you for joining me for this special edition of the OBX Wave Report. We're going to get our GoPro up and running and probably surf some creepy waves today. The waves are really small out there at Jeanette's, and I'm not going to be able to drive all the way down to Buxton or further south to get some bigger waves. Plus, I'm working on my pop-ups with my stiffer hips. I'm about 50 years old, but we're not going to give up. Um, we're going to keep trying to improve our surfing as well. So, all right. So I'll look forward to seeing you guys at the coastline. We're going to get some observations from the coast. We're going to do some level ups to try and improve our quality of video. and get you guys some good observations regardless of how small the waves are. So thank you for joining me for this session, this special session of the OPX Wave Report. And please remember to do everything you can to help support the scientists and to help mass deploy clean energy, which is the primary answer to climate crisis, and to also help save our forests and revitalize our living systems, our life support systems here on the earth, which include forests and coral reefs and so many other wild features that will help to bring our world back into balance after we transition to clean energy and get to net zero carbon emissions and net negative.